Good evening, welcome. I'm Vikram Oza. You're watching The Big Question on NDTV Profit. Now, if you go to see, for the last 30 odd years, India's tech story has had this one big hero, and that is IT services. We wrote the code, the world paid for it, and the dollars just kept coming. It built companies, it built careers, and an entire industry. And honestly, it has been a great run when you talk about India's IT prowess. But this week, Zerodha's Nitin Kamath is basically asking this: can that old formula still carry us into the future? In a social media post that is now everywhere, he points out that tech is not just tech anymore. It's geopolitics. And let me explain what he means by that. Since the year 2020, countries now have been putting tighter controls on the chips, on the rare earths, and the advanced manufacturing tools. Supply chains, they're not just about cutting costs now. They are treated as national security assets. And Nitin Kamath says that is something quite stark over here. He says that in this new world, India cannot rely only on expecting software to carry us into the next generation. With AI doing more and more of the coding, and the traditional asset-light IT model now is going to feel the squeeze, he says. So the next phase of growth, he believes at least, will come from the heavy stuff, what he calls atoms, not just bits like he calls it, which means, in other words, data centers, defense tech, batteries, semiconductors, robotics, and advanced manufacturing. And if you follow the money, that's where investors are already moving. And then there is the bigger worry that he's highlighting over here, which is that while India has the talent to build all of this, maybe India does not have the ecosystem. What does that mean? It means not enough long-term capital, not enough R&D support, not enough government procurement, all of the things that help deep tech companies scale. China has spent decades building those bridges. India is now just getting started, which brings us to the big question tonight. And that's the question: if IT exports right now have been driving the last era for us in India, what about the next generation? Is deep tech going to move us into the era coming up next? And if so, then is India ready? There is going to be a long gestation period. It is going to be costly. Is India ready to take us into that entire deep tech kind of ecosystem? Where are we right now? Let's take this across to our panel. And joining us on the show, we have Manohar Singh Charan, the co-founder of ShareChat, joining us. Along with him, Satish Andhra is with us as well. Satish Andhra is partner at NDTV Partners. And yes, we have Jaspreet Singh. He's partner cybersecurity at Grant Thornton. Gokul N.A. is founder, design product and brand at Cinder. Great to have you all, gentlemen. Thanks for making the time. Satish, if I can ask you for your simple comment first so that we understand where you stand in this debate. Can India still afford this startup ecosystem which is dominated by IT services and fintech and consumer apps? Or you think the world has changed too much now for that kind of model to continue?
Thanks for having me on the show, Vikram. Definitely, I think COVID kind of disrupted the supply chains. And if you really look at today, the geopolitical issues, tariff and commerce, sovereign independence, all of those, and security of nations have become very, very important. AI is kind of killing it. I mean, if you look at the thing that we thrived on, right, India as an ecosystem was a lot of services and software that we built for the world, and that was purely on labor arbitrage. And if you really look at if 30-40% of the code, including certain critical workflows, is today written by AI, of course, that's disrupted. So to me, I think the overall geopolitical situation out there, plus AI on the other side, kind of mandates in a very quick moment. But we have to realize that these things take time, right? So when we're investing and building companies, we're building for 2035. We're not building for 2025. And ecosystems take time to evolve. We need to be patient and we need to make moves. At NDTV Partners, we've not been talking about deep tech today. 2017, we invested in Steradian Semiconductors, a semiconductor chip imaging radar chip.
Yeah.
In 2017, again, we invested in Sigtuple, an AI pathology company that's got FDA approval, that's going global. We continued that. And even in 2020, post-COVID, we've invested in companies like Perceptine, which is industrial kind of humanoid for manufacturing, and Blue Jay, which is an eVTOL, hybrid propulsion-driven eVTOL. Ecosystem has to kind of wake up, and I think government is making tremendous moves, including RDIF and many other initiatives.
So you've been making incremental steps. Is that the way to go? Because you're saying that all of this requires patience, it takes time. The gestation period can be high. In which case, Manohar, deep tech, is it no longer a choice for Indian startups right now? You think it's going to be a survival strategy in a world where AI is writing most of the software?
Sure. Vikram, good evening. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this panel. I would, being a founder, I would take a slightly optimistic view here. Survival probably is, I'd put it slightly differently. We will need to realign ourselves for sure. What took us here is not going to take us there. So that reality we will have to accept and start adapting to it. At ShareChat, for example, we were the first company in India to start using machine learning models to build content recommendation systems back in 2017 itself. And COVID, as Satish said, has accelerated this disruption. Some companies would have taken steps before time, but after COVID, things have just taken a different pace altogether. So we started building our machine learning models in 2017. Post 2020, we had to literally quadruple the size of our team. And one big realization was, as you said in the beginning,
yes,
India is the coding factory for the world. We had a great talent pool when it came to IT and IT-enabled services. But when it comes to deep tech, we have to almost like start from scratch. As we were building our own recommendation systems team, and in 2020, when we planned to literally quadruple our team size, we realized that for the specialization for which we were trying to hire, we already had almost like 40 to 50% of India's talent pool on our payroll.
Yeah.
And that was just in double-digit numbers. So we had to literally use a guerrilla kind of technique to find good AI talent wherever we could. So for example, when the Russia-Ukraine crisis started, there were some good engineers that freed up from that part of the world, which we could hire.
Right.
When the acquisition of Twitter happened, there were some good engineers that got freed up from there.
Correct.
And we had to literally like pick one good talent at a time and crossbreed. Today we have very large ML engineering team in India that's cross-trained with global talent pool. And we maintain a set of senior talent from across the world to sort of build this team. When you compare it to, say, IT or ITES talent that we have in the country, we're literally minuscule. So on building the talent pool, there is a long way for us to go. But the positive side to look at it is, we have great institutions in IITs and IISc. We have the foundation laid for us. We will have to use this foundation to train different set of talent.
Right.
And smaller countries like UK, Singapore, Ireland, UAE are going out of their way to attract global talent.
Correct.
They are providing tax breaks.
So how competitive are we to draw in that kind of talent pool? And that's going to be in question too. But you're talking about the smaller countries. Jaspreet, why don't you weigh in on what the Americans and the Chinese and the Europeans are doing? They're clearly tightening their export controls on chips and minerals and advanced tech. What does that really mean for India? Are we vulnerable, like Mr. Kamath is pointing out, if we don't build these deep tech resources ourselves?
Good evening, Vikram. Thanks for having me here. Very, very pertinent question, but I think everybody is looking at AI as if it's a 100-meter race. Sorry, I think it will, this is going to be the race of the century, and it's going to take lots and lots of ecosystem coming together to make sure that we make it a success. I'd like to take it back to a little bit of history. 2001, 2002, there was the same debate saying, is India poised to become the next IT services hub? When there was a lot of talk about Manila coming up the rank, there were countries in Eastern Europe coming up the rank. Now everybody is talking about deep tech. Yes, if you look at consumer tech or ed tech, etc., we are right there up with the world. But please understand, deep tech is not such an easy race to run like some of the others. Right? We will have to rise as a country to the deep tech challenge. What does that mean? It means that components need to become cheaper, the manufacturing needs to be run in-house. My fellow panelists spoke about, access to quality education, right? For unfortunately today, AI or some of the deep tech education is only available in very limited engineering colleges. I don't think so even all the engineering colleges
Yeah.
give access to that kind of education. So I think, uh, are we are we late starters? Answer is probably yes. But do we have the wherewithal, the entire ecosystem falling in place? Like the recent budget, for example, allows large cloud services providers to come build data centers in India.
Yeah.
That will boost and whole lot of innovation coming out of India, gives a boost to Indian startups.
So
You'll
you
have
So you make this
compute
very
up.
valid point that ecosystems need to kind of work together and come together. Satish, from your perspective, with everything that Jaspreet is pointing out over here, you need deep tech, which requires patient capital. It requires this long gestation. It requires heavy R&D as well. And yes, we need to build that talent pool. So our education system needs to support it. I'm just wondering, from the VC ecosystem, does it genuinely support it right now, or you think that ecosystem is still optimized for the quick return kind of software startups that we've built?
No, I think it's fast changing, like I said, right? All of the VC funds have 10 to 12-year life cycles, and that's changing. Private capital gestation periods or life cycles are changing around the globe. But I think most important thing, Vikram, that we need to realize is it's just not the capital or the talent, right? I think from an ecosystem perspective, quick time to market becomes extremely important. And so whether it's the R&D infrastructure grants or fast regulatory approvals, they also become big catalysts, right, for the deep tech companies to survive and kind of thrive. Look at any of the deep tech companies that we're talking about, right? Tesla, Nvidia, SpaceX, even software companies like Microsoft. 50% of their revenues come from the globe. 50% of the revenues could be US, and 50% of the revenues are coming from other regions other than US. So how big is the local market is also a big question, right, for many of these startups.
Yeah.
And one of the big issues for the deep tech ecosystem today in the country is there's plenty of risk capital at the seed stage or Series A maybe, but it is not there at the growth stage. So that is another piece. Apart from solving for longer fund cycles,
Right.
growth capital availability is going to be the key question for most of the venture capital and private equity companies. I think from the policy perspective, how quickly can you enable the R&D infrastructure grants, regulatory approvals, and fast track some of the procurement?
Yeah.
I'm not saying government needs to support companies, right? Government needs to support sectors.
Right.
And let the sectors pick the companies,
Correct.
not the government.
Correct.
And you look at DARPA in US, you look at YOSMA in Israel, all of them seeded the ecosystem. So that's why I keep saying that we're really building companies for the next 2 decades. It's
Right.
not for tomorrow, though COVID and the geopolitical system exacerbates the situation.
Let me ask Gokul what he makes of this, because he's nodding vigorously while you speak. I see all the activity behind you, Gokul, and you're, of course, running Cinder. But tell us, without the domestic strength in semiconductors and defense tech and robotics and batteries, are we building economic growth right now, or you think this is about strategic dependence? What is the line of work that you're in right now? Are we building that economic growth through startups like yours?
Absolutely, Vikram. Thanks for having me here. I think I have to resonate with most of the points that Satish also put and Jaspreet also put, right, and also with Manohar. Similar problems all of us do face, but as to the question, I think we need to bifurcate between infrastructure and exploiting the possibilities that came out of infrastructure. Technology should be considered more as an infrastructure building within every country, right? So what we built in terms of communication and the mobile platforms, mobile phone platforms, and so on and so forth in 2000s were exploited in terms of consumer technology and fin technology in the last 10 years, right? So
Yes.
COVID exposed the limits of it, catalyzed the possibility to look back at the gaps that we have in infrastructure, which is manifesting again now as foundational technology for supply chain that you have to build around, right? So, and it also catalyzed the ability to bring AI to the forefront, and the results of which is the domain that I am in, right? So for past almost 10 years, we have been building into the robotics specifically. That is also catalyzing today because of the need for expanding into the supply chain, and people do see this very seriously, as our governments across the globe do seriously see this as a security threat in most cases. So it has become an internal need in most cases. But that is a wake-up call, which we don't have ready, available ecosystem and infrastructure for, right? So starting from talent, which is the know-how, and then to supply and material, even to facilitate this is an absent space.
Right.
So that we need to kind of
So in building
look
this
at it.
infrastructure, Jaspreet, taking away from what Gokul is saying, robotics, of course, a need. He's even highlighting the nationalized nature that Nitin Kamath is saying, that it has become, deep tech has become very nationalized right now when you talk about chips and semiconductors, which is part of that entire geopolitics debate. But looking at the importance from everything that we are hearing, do we have that infrastructure, the clean rooms, the fabs, the industrial R&D labs, all of which deep tech requires? Where are we there?
I think, as I said, it's a step in progress, right? Will we have a utopia world where everything will be available?
No, but where exactly are we? If you do that comparison as well, Jaspreet, I want to understand the ecosystem. When you make it with the emerging economies right now, where do we stand? Or even want to kind of aspire to the kind of levels that China has risen to, where do we stand today?
Okay, so if you read the latest NASSCOM report, we have the sixth largest deep tech ecosystem. But given that the leaders are quite a distance away from whether you look at Americas or the Chinas of the world, I think there we are definitely laggards, right? In terms of infrastructure, because we don't have the infrastructure, hence we don't have those critical deep tech already out there in the marketing servicing the Indian consumers, Indian customers, and we are probably not building for tomorrow, right? But if you also look at some of the other statistics, that a deep tech in itself takes about 3 to 5 years to incubate, right? It is not as if China decided post-COVID that we'll invest in deep tech. Right. They always had the infrastructure. Right. I think we need to have a plan in place, which may not be a 2030, 2035, but a next 2-year, 18-month plan on how do we scale up our infrastructure? Right. How do we scale those data centers? What do we do from an R&D perspective? What can we do from a semiconductors perspective? I think government is taking a lot of steps, but are those steps enough? Maybe is a question that is for the jury out there to answer.
Yes, indeed. Let me take it across to Satish. Satish, do you think our government is doing enough? Should the government, do you think, actively pick winners in deep tech the way China has done? Or do you think that is going to risk distorting the market, as it were, and kill innovation? How do you think the government should move ahead on this count?
No, I think government is doing pretty well on the policy front. But if you look at RDIF, as a fund, right, I think it's going to have a 5x multiplier effect in terms of overall capital that's going to come into the ecosystem. Like I said earlier, I think that's one component, and then creating talent and then revising curriculum, providing that infrastructure in college environments is all good. I think certain areas where government can do better, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of thinking that's going on and whiteboarding that's going on, is quicker regulatory approvals, kind of giving capital for R&D infrastructure and faster procurement.
Yes.
I think those would be some of the areas to focus on to enable these startups kind of get to escape velocity. I think one more thing we have to understand, Vikram, I mean, if you look at COVID time, we all remember that if we didn't have Bharat Biotech, where we would be as a country, right? But True. Bharat Biotech was in the making for 15, 20 years. It wasn't born, during COVID time.
True.
So deep tech companies do take time, and they're running a sprint as well as a marathon.
Correct.
Right? I think we need to recognize that.
No, fair enough. But
so we need to get
it's
started.
also very important to recognize, and Manohar, you perhaps can comment on this, deep tech needs not just invention, it requires scale as well. So we're talking factories, suppliers, manufacturing partners, like it's being highlighted. Can Indian startups scale hardware the way that we've been able to scale software?
So I really like the way Satish said it's a sprint as well as a marathon. It's like not just a short sprint. We have to run both simultaneously. When it comes to the India startup ecosystem, there is we've seen that pick any sector, our startups are sort of dreaming it big, making all the efforts that are required. When it comes to hardware, it's not just one team or one startup that can sort of break out without having a supporting ecosystem. So software, of course, also needs overall ecosystem, but the requirement or the role that the manufacturing ecosystem, the supply chain, the pace at which approvals, etc., come through, the role of that component just sort of goes out of proportion, and therefore standalone, it was, I would say, relatively easier to build a software company. Even when the other components maybe, let's say, lagging behind as compared to global peers, it is that much harder to break out in the hardware plus software race on standalone. Stats are in front of us. The number of new startups that are setting up facilities outside, being set up by Indians, but going outside, is on the rise. That kind of reflects that we definitely can do better. As Satish said, government is thinking and taking steps in the right direction. There is a lot of deliberation that's happening. Some of the stats that you flashed on the screen are also worth noting. The PLI schemes, the tax breaks that we provided for data centers. Now data centers can set up in India and serve global requirements.
Correct. No,
So
absolutely. So you're saying the government push is there. The thinking is in line. But Gokul, tell us where investor appetite stands. Is it real right now when you talk about deep tech, or are we still at that hype stage?
I think there is a bit of a hype stage, but there's also an absence phase when it comes to the investments into the deep technology. The definition of deep tech is often confused between hardware tech and the deep tech per se. So when you're building several layers below and then you have to come all the way up is when the deep tech becomes more complicated. And I don't think there are theses identified within the investment world to structure and then fund for these longer journeys. Right. So this is like, it's a marathon, right? So sprint or not is still a marathon. It is going to be another 15-year problem. And when you're thinking about deep tech, you're not starting on an existing infrastructure to leverage it in capturing a market. You have to also build a market around it. So there is that foundation. There is a huge entry barrier for most of the startups. They have to build an ecosystem and foster an ecosystem around them, especially in hardware. You do not have supply chain available to you. You have to invent and then invest into them mostly. So that understanding how to metricize and then measure value within an startup in its growth stages, which is not directly reflected by the revenue often, right? So there is that gap that makes the investors to be reluctant into investing into these spaces. Also to convince their LPs to bring in investments for them, first of all, to say what's the thesis and package by which they'll be able to do value multiples, right? So the structure globally is yet to evolve. We do hear big numbers, but percentage even today into deep tech across the globe as an investment is smaller. It's a very small portion compared to the larger investments. And often it comes from corporate extensions or government funds aiding these. Like China is a phenomenon not because of VC funds going and doing it, but also largely because governments pushing those schemes, very right direction that India is doing. Also added to that particular point, all of them spoke about talent. India is an absent space in masters and PhD programs. We don't have research clusters, which is the most important thing. So I can have money, but that's a fuel. But without a car, I can't move farther away. So I need an infrastructure built on that front. And the system of customs and income tax has to also distinguish manufacturing and R&D as two independent segments. Cost into the R&D, importing components free. We need to be allowed to import freely the components from outside, and then later in the long term force us to have that locally developed, right?
Right.
So there are no credit systems around this where tax burdens are removed for the R&D systems, where you can bring it as a credits later to be transferred. So
these are
some
the needs,
aspects.
and there is a gap over there, Satish. I will let you have the final word on this because, like Jaspreet pointed out, India is 6th in the world in deep tech startups. Do you see us becoming this genuine alternative to China as a trusted and low-cost deep tech hub? How soon do you think that could happen, whether we run that sprint or the marathon? How soon are we going to get there?
I think it'll take us at least 10 years, from my prediction. It's not going to happen overnight. To build all this capital infrastructure like semiconductor fabs and, ATMP plants, it will take time, right? And similarly, when you're talking about defense, when you're talking about space, when you're talking about mobility, advanced mobility, biotech, all of these have very, very complex supply chains, right? I think Gokul talked about it. I mean, if this supply chain, you have a lot of dependencies to import certain critical parts, right? So we always talk about rare earth materials, but you also talk about even simple electronics that is not manufactured in the country. To kind of import them and build prototypes, it takes time. So to me, while we need certain quick winners, we need certain playbooks. I think we had playbooks in consumer, we had playbooks in software, we had playbooks in fintech, but we don't have playbooks in deep tech. And those would be created in the next few years. While we'll have certain quick hits, I think overall for the ecosystem to prosper and be a force, I think it's going to take 8 to 10 years. We need to be patient, and we all need to work on it. And all of us are responsible. I mean, it's just not the government alone, right?
Yes,
I think the investors, the entrepreneurs, corporates. I think one thing, I kind of disagree with Gokul. If you look at overall, when we consider deep tech, in the US, you look at the capital expenditure by the top 4 software companies. I mean, that's going into data centers. That is deep tech investment.
Right.
That is going into chips, right? That is going into robotics. That is going into advanced energy development, because rest of the ecosystem kind of flourishes.
Yes.
So as our GDP increases and as there is pressure on all of us, I think we need to move faster.
We need to move faster.
Collectively, this ecosystem needs to take it to the next level.
Absolutely. So at the heart of this debate is India's startup story, and we are clearly entering this new chapter. The world is moving from software to science, from code to core technology. And if India has to stay competitive, then deep tech cannot be optional anymore. The opportunity is huge, like the gentleman here is pointing out. The challenges are as real, and the clock right now is ticking, so we need to move that piece soon. My thanks to our guests joining us with their insights, Manohar Singh Charan, Satish Andhra, Jaspreet Singh, Gokul N.A. Thank you very much for joining us on The Big Question. And indeed, we'll keep tracking this piece because it's an important one as far as India's leap into the next era is concerned. We cannot rely solely on our exports, which are software-oriented, but now we need to build our deep tech and build it fast. How soon we are able to do that is going to be a piece we'll be watching and tracking closely. I'm Vikram Oza, for me and the team on The Big Question. Good evening.